one of the things I'm really excited about, I like the guys from University of Cincinnati. You know, I don't want to be corny, and the guys from Virginia Tech. These young people who are getting excited about this and we're picking up the ball on this and doing something about it, I really think is a tremendous hope for our future. And I believe, and I hope I'm not being utterly unrealistic, that eventually this is going to succeed because the technical story is solid, and as people hear it, they begin, I think, to get more excited about it and want to make it happen. There's an enormous amount of inertia against us. In fact, sometimes I think we're crazy to go after this, and I go, no, but it works. Fundamentally it works, and that's why it's worth continuing to pursue. It may take a whole lot longer than we think, but all good things are worth doing.
Okay, Joe Bonvetti. I think the first thing I learned that really shocked me was solar kills turtles. That was my favorite.
Sorry about that.
No, I think the one thing I took away across the board that I'm a little bit disappointed about was I didn't see anybody say, "Hey, I've got some small amount of funding towards this." I was very, very encouraged with the international participation. I think that's very good. I also was very encouraged with the university students as well. So we're seeing a little bit of emphasis there. I think we're getting out, to the public and to others in the political end that this is serious and we need to actually look into it in more detail.
When the Buddha was giving sermons, and people gathered around to hear him give sermons, one day they all gathered to hear him give a sermon and take another step for enlightenment. And all he did was hold up a flower. So this is what I'm holding up. This is my lifetime share of waste if all of my electricity comes from Thorium. And it's not even waste because it can be recycled. So that's probably the biggest take-home thing. Plus, I got a tchotchke and I show people when I go around giving talks. My name is Gwyneth Cravens, and I'm a writer, and I wrote a book called Power to Save the World: The Truth About Nuclear Energy. A couple of other things that impressed me were that wind power is $14 a watt, and Oconee nuclear is 79 cents a watt. That France is saving more CO2 for Germany than the Germans are. That Maurice Gunderson invited people here to show him their schemes, for investment purposes. I thought that was a really interesting moment. And the rare earth scandal was completely unknown to me. I had some vague idea that things like lithium were getting hard to find and so on, but that was quite an eye-opener, and it has ramifications for so many things in our society, and in particular trying to build energy products, energy sources. So that's it.
So I think I should introduce myself. My name's Ian Clutchy. I'm a tech lead at Google. I actually design cameras for TEAC2. So I have no formal education at all in input power, but it's just something I think maybe a little bit like Lars. It's something that I'm interested in, and I was looking at my email logs to check, and actually, as far as I can tell, John, you sent me an email saying, "Hey, can we do this TEAC thing at Google this time?" And
I think it was Kirk started the ball rolling on that. But
yeah, and then I said to Chris, sounds like a good idea to me, and he sent a little thing over to Chris DeBona, who I don't believe is here anymore. It's actually Chris DeBona who's paying for this whole thing.
Really?
So hats off to Chris DeBona. That's right. This is the open source manager at Google, and thanks a lot, Chris DeBona. Here. And,
he's not.
Yeah,
he felt despair.
Then the way it actually happens is that Chris hands it off to Kat, and Kat worked with you and set the whole thing up. And I really appreciate all the work you've done, John.
Oh, thank you.
So things that I saw. So I think coming to the conference, the thing that I most want to hear. People keep asking me, gosh, doesn't Google have a lot of money? Can't they spend it on Thorium stuff? And so the answer to that is, well, certainly I don't have a lot of money. I can spend, millions of dollars on cameras, but the money I can spend on other stuff is pretty small. But I do know a little bit about trying to sell projects in here. And so what I didn't see in the last 2 days that I was hoping for, but it's okay, is a story that could be sold. I don't think we've actually achieved that point yet. Things are a little more clear to me than they were maybe a year or two ago, but I haven't seen things come together yet. And hopefully there are other investors that have a better idea of how to sell things than I do. But so maybe that's a little disappointing, but it's not too bad. I think the other thing, I'll just mention one thing that I saw that was actually kind of surprising and interesting, was the notion that there are now accelerators. I thought the accelerator breakout session, or the accelerator-driven system breakout session over there was fascinating. In particular because I had not realized that there were accelerators that could produce neutron flows that were at all comparable to the kinds of neutron flows that happen in reactors. And I mean, even within 5 or 6 orders of magnitude, I thought it just wasn't possible. And it sounds like maybe it is. And that's kind of shocking. And it sounds like I need to learn a lot more about how such things are licensed, because obviously once you have large flows of neutrons, you have a potential weapon system. And so you need to figure that out. So anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting. And I think next question.
Okay. Speaking of accelerators, I don't know if y'all saw the news today, but the Large Hadron Collider is finally working. And for another Wired story a few years ago, I went to CERN. This was probably '03 when they were building the thing. And you've never seen such a monumental science project as this thing. At one point, I was standing next to one of the support, I don't know what you would call it, but support system is basically a huge U-shaped piece of machinery that holds up one of the test beds on this 7 kilometer or so accelerator ring. And I started to do this, and the guy said, I wouldn't lean against that because it's supported by a cushion of air and it might move. And the thing was 7 stories tall, weighed multiple tons. My point being that when I hear people say, oh, we can't marshal the resources and we can't get countries together and it's impossible, I'd say look at the Large Hadron Collider. That thing exists to provide employment for physicists. Okay, none of us in this room, and I'm all for it actually, but none of us in this room will ever be affected by anything that happens at that Large Hadron Collider. And it took dozens of billions of dollars, the cooperation of many, many countries. And so that's, I think we should look to that and say, okay, if we can do that, it's not going to affect people's daily lives. We can build a lifter that's going to change our energy future. And the most disappointing or the most discouraging thing I heard was, of course, Professor Peterson's contention that any new material or new fuel is going to take multiple decades to be approved and qualified. So you're looking at 2030 or 2040 before we can build one of these things. And so I just want to throw that open to the panel and get some responses and see what you have to say. No surprise that Kirk has it.
But I think, I don't know if Perry's here, raise your hand. So, okay, good.
He was a little
Freely then, all right. One of the, to quench your pessimism, one of the basic long poles in the tent of building a solid fueled reactor is fuel qualification, because the fuel is meant to have structural integrity. It's meant to retain fission products, retain gases, all that kind of stuff. So when you want to qualify a fuel, you need to go stick it in a representative type reactor, and you need to give it representative neutron fluence. Usually you want to give it worse than what it's going to get, and you want to try to speed that up. That is a very long pole type experience for a solid fuel. And if you look back on the history of our uranium oxide fuel, solid fueled reactors, the first ones didn't run for 40 years. The first ones ran for 5 or 10 years, and then they were refueled, because that's about how long they knew. When they first started, they didn't really know how long the fuel was going to last. But it was an evolutionary process. one of the profound advantages of a liquid-fueled reactor is the fuel has no structural integrity. It doesn't hold fission product gases, which is good. We want fission product gases to come out because they're poisons. And it holds the other fission products chemically. It holds them, they're bound to stable fluorides or stable chlorides or so forth. To qualify this fuel was very easy. They would throw it in a little capsule and they'd stick it in a high flux reactor like Heifer at Oak Ridge, and they would basically trick it into thinking that it had been in the reactor for 20 years in about 6 months. They just pound the snot out of it with neutrons. The nice thing about fluoride salts is they're essentially impervious to neutron damage. You can beat on them forever and they don't change. And so we can qualify fuels very quickly. In fact, the case can be made fluoride fuels are already qualified from their experience on MSRE. The other part of that is the structural materials, and that may be closer to what I think he was talking about as far as a little bit of pessimism there. Hastelloy is not an ASME Code 3 material, and it will take a while to get it there probably. But one thing that is exciting, and the Berkeley guys who I think have left know this a whole lot better than I do, is they're looking at Berkeley about, and raise your hand if you're Berkeley. Okay, you may know this better than I do, but I know they're looking at Hastelloy clad Haynes alloy. Haynes alloy is ASME code qualified, and if they could clad it with Hastelloy, it would protect it against the salts and allow us to potentially move forward a whole lot faster. So I understand that, it's not a piece of cake, but at the same time, I don't think we're 15 or 20 years away from building the first lifter. I think with some clever metallurgy and the nature of the fuel, we can do it a whole lot faster.
Yeah, I would say that my initial comments when I spoke was on this very subject, that in the long run, it depends on who's making the final decisions. If it's a government-run program and they're intentionally dragging their feet, it can take forever. And if they want to put it on a fast track, it can go a lot faster. There's no technical issues in that regard, and you may have to have the first couple of them only run for 5 years and then disassemble them and take a look at it. But in the at least the small reactor types, we're thinking about making this modular and producing many of the same type, so you wouldn't have as much of a problem increasing every couple of years the length of time as you prove the system out.
Let me put a small addendum on that. I mean, the MSRE is a perfect example of it. They built it out of Hastelloy. They ran it for 5 years, and then they had Hastelloy samples in the middle. At the end, they pulled them out, and they said, well, what happened? They found a little bit of tellurium. It caused a little bit of cracking in the Hastelloy. They go, we're going to adjust the chemistry. We're going to fix that. I mean, they had a solution for it. They needed to run another one, essentially almost like an MSRE2 to see if their fix worked, but that was right in 1970 when they were getting canceled, as you put so eloquently, 1973 in the Wired article. So, the guys who did pressurized water reactors, they did all the same things in the 50s as far as nailing corrosion and figuring out the right materials and linking this problem. I don't think there's any royal road to it. So
we have a comment from the audience.
I just wanted to point out, you're not talking about a commercial reactor here where you start it up and you run it for 5 years, and after 5 years you might decide that the structural material wasn't qualified properly, and well, your investment is not going to pay over your next 30 years, but only over your next 5 years. So it's a different story, you see.
Order of magnitude less than possible.
Actually, can
Good point.
This is one of the things I heard at this conference that I thought was really interesting. So I think if we have the expectation that what somebody's going to design is they're going to design a Gen 4 reactor, it's going to be a molten salt reactor, it's going to have a lifetime and a return on investment and a safety and a size that are all similar to what we're used to from existing Gen 2 reactors, Gen 2, whatever. So, I just don't think that's a reasonable expectation. And I don't think that's what we should be looking for next. I don't think that's the next step. I think the next, where the molten salt reactors, I mean, yes, they built the MSRE, but the next step is much more like another research reactor. It's another try. And I think that I see a number of things. One, I see that I'm very interested in this notion that there are code cases to be built for materials. It would appear that if you could identify the materials and the conditions under which they have to survive for the plant, 30 years, whatever it is, you could perhaps start building that code case now.
Yeah.
in anticipation of needing those materials for designing plants in the future that actually will be full-blown commercial scale reactors. The other expectation is, I'm losing my thread of thought here. People looking at me.
Can I say something while you're doing that, Patrick? I was just going to say real quick, there's another aspect of this too, and part of it is the nuclear damage the material sustains. The other part is the chemical damage it sustains. We can build salt loops that we can trick into thinking that they're reactor loops. We can put a little bit of strontium, a little bit of yttrium, a little bit of cesium, all non-nuclear, but chemically it's the same as what it would be with if it was radioactive. And you can go and run these at high temperatures for extended periods of time, and you can go and look and see, okay, if I'm making this chemically identical to the real thing, it may not be nuclear identical, it's chemically identical, I can go and see in a big case, you know, here's a bunch of different versions of Haskell, how do they hold up against it, and help build your code cases faster. So that's a nice thing you can do.
Yeah, I want to go back to Ian's point about adjusting expectations. Look at the money that's going into carbon capture and sequestration right now. Government funded. No one has any illusion that there's going to be commercial CCS plants in the next 10 years. But there are utilities and companies like Schlumberger lining up to get federal funding to start creating the components. And that is a technology, believe me, that has a lot less of a chance of succeeding than lifters. So again, I think that's a really good point. We need to adjust our expectations and work on sort of the side that TEA is working on, because I think everyone in this room is pretty confident about the technology. And now it's time to figure out, okay, how are we going to, you know, get a lot more Chuck DeVore's on our side and get this stuff, you know, funded and start building the projects, not the commercial version.
Gwyneth?
This is my impression from hanging out a little bit on the Hill and talking to some politicians and their aides, and from going around the country speaking about nuclear power. Whenever I mention, there are two things that get a lot of positive reaction, even from people. I was at a sustainability conference in Chico State and was harangued by angry elderly hippies like me. Didn't think I belonged there at a sustainability conference. But when I talk about small modular reactors, and I talk about thorium power, thorium fuel, everybody gets all sort of no. And thorium's just, they don't know anything about thorium, but it's not uranium, which, you know, caused Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I think that part of the story, and I think Ian's quite right, that you have to develop a narrative that you can tell congressmen and so on who are not engineers, didn't serve in the Navy, this is all kind of new to them, where they're more likely you're going to be talking to their staffs, and they might or might not know stuff. And so it's important to have a narrative, but those two words, small reactor and thorium, have a kind of magic power all their own. The other thing I would mention is that the NRC, the reason there's a bottleneck in terms of innovations is the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and they get their mandate from Congress. So unless some laws are changed, they're going to continue operating like robots, doing their job, which is, you know, they can't make up rules and things. They can create a department for small reactors, for example, but they can't just say, hey, we like those thorium guys, let's look at the thorium. No, it all has to be done in a certain way, in a bureaucratic way. So that has to be worked on. There's another important thing that we all should be campaigning for, which is to bring back the Office of Technology Assessment in Congress, which used to advise congressmen. Do it, right?
Killed by who again? Remind me, what administration?
Newt Gingrich is what I've been.
Yeah.
And now Congress gets all their information. Well, what do I know? But like I've been told, 98% or something of their information comes from lobbyists. So if Greenpeace comes in with a scheme for floating wind farms or something, then they might be heavily persuaded by that, and there's no Office of Technology Assessment to say, that's never going to do it. And then you have that guy, Willinghoff, what was his name? John Willinghoff, who said, we don't need base load wind and dispatch. So, again, if you have this OTA working with Congress, you have some kind of scientific backstop. So I'll get off my soapbox. And thank you very much for having me at this conference. I have to run now, and I'm sorry to miss the rest of this.
I noticed that Chris DeBona just entered the room, and we understand, Chris, that you're the man behind making this happen, so I'd like you to stand so we can offer a round of applause.
Yeah!
Well, we're going to say you paid for it. So
I was going to say, I wanted to finish up on that last thing, and this actually feeds right into it, because I wanted to point out that one of the things you have to look at in this meeting and where we go forward is we talk about grassroots or open source design and the development of this and pushing it forward through the political system or the engineering system. Or, you know, it's a more classic case of it's a big government program, maybe a single country, and process it through that way. I think we need to discuss that at length in the future. Open source sounds really good. It sounds like a Google thing. I don't know how practical that is. Can individual, universities come up with the material processing that we just talked about, host that and have it available to others that are actually doing the design? It'd be an interesting case to look at.
So what is next? I'd like 3 suggestions about concrete steps that either the individuals in this room or John or Chris DeBona or the Alliance can take to move things forward.
So, so I've been talking to Lars a bit about this. I can't speak to what could be sold to government very well. I don't have any experience doing that kind of thing. For technology development inside companies like the one I work at, what we need is a story about the technological risks that exist and projects for how to retire those risks, how to turn them into something which is potentially there's still remaining risk, but it's known, it's quantified, it's controlled. There's a number of these things we can talk about, but there's Lars is concerned about the first wall, there's tritium control, things like this, all of which were addressed by Oak Ridge in the 1960s. I think that there's still work to be done there. I think it'd be interesting to talk about what those sub-projects would look like. This notion of building a code case for materials that could be used to build reactors for 30-year deployments at some point in the future. So I think that's one thing. And I think that the other thing that I would really like to see is I think there's a small class of people that have, and you all know their names, right? They're the Bill Gates, they're the Bill Joy, you may not recognize the name of, Sergey Brin, Larry Page, people like this. I mean, these people have been very successful, and they're looking for the mark that they're going to leave on the world, right? There were the railroad magnates of 100 years ago. These people are looking for what stamp they will leave behind. And I think that potentially solving this global catastrophe that, it's funny, right? We talk about this global catastrophe, and we're all sitting here, and like this catastrophe is not killing off, say, the 2 people that are sitting on the left-hand side of the room while we're talking here, right? We're a frog being boiled in water, and we don't feel it. But I think that that legacy of having solved this potential global catastrophe is a pretty significant legacy, and I think there's a fairly large large by 10 number of people that would be interested in having that be their legacy. And I think that somehow we need to reach out to them and give them this opportunity. But I don't have the story yet. I don't see it all together. But I'm really excited because like I didn't know squat about it before I started reading your blog. So there's parts of the story here, and I think more story needs to be written. And then I think we can, and I think the way this is going to go, because I think it could go through governments, but I think governments are somewhat ossified and driven a large part by fear and the populace. I think our newest crop of billionaires really are a societal force, and I think there's a possibility there.
What to do next? I'm going to offer 3 suggestions in 3 categories. The first one is political, and my whole overarching thing here is, you know, I don't make any money running my blog. It's definitely a money-losing operation. If I throw the opportunity cost of the hours I spend on the whole thing, it's a humongously money-losing operation. So I don't think about that because it doesn't really matter. I got 4 kids and I want them to have a better future. But number 1, personal. So let's talk about what we can do as people. Number 1, personal. Go back to wherever you're from and see if you're excited about this, if you believe in it. Go give a talk at a library or to a chamber of commerce or to a church group or to your friends. Go talk about it. A lot of you already do this. Some of you have great talks put together. Keep doing that. If you haven't, try to go do that. You know, share it. Talk to people in the grocery store. Tell people about global warming. Is a great opportunity because most of the world goes, oh my gosh, global warming, we're all going to die. What do I do? Do I buy some light bulbs? And you go, well, that might make you feel a little bit better, but it's not going to make any difference. You know, what's going to make a difference? Shutting off the coal plant that's 20 miles down the river. Get in the car one Sunday and drive to your nearest power plant and show your kids where the juice comes from. You know, that's a big thing. And so that's the first thing. Talk to people about it. Politically, for all you American citizens, write your senator and congressman. Just write them a letter. I was in a congressman's office about a year ago, and I was watching the staffer open the letter. And at least for our congressman, the staffer was reading him, and he went and he talked to the congressman. It's not as crazy as you think to go and write your congressman. There's a pretty good chance a staffer will read it. And believe it or not, that's the person you want to read it, is the staffer. Because the staffer is the person who forms the opinions that the congressman's going to have. So if the staffer I'm not kidding you, the staffer got 10 letters that said, hey, we're really into thorium and we want you to look at it and we think it offers a lot of promise. This poor 19-year-old kid's going to go, what's thorium? I'm going to get on Wikipedia and I'm going to go find out. You know, something will happen. And then the next time the congressman's doing something, you go, oh, well, you know, there's some people that wrote you letters about that, sir. Oh, okay. Is it good? Yeah, we think so. Oh, okay, it's good then. Let me just say good things about it. You know, you can make a difference. Tie it into whatever they're interested in. We got a lot of these congressmen and senators that are already kind of interested in it. That's something you can do, and it does make a difference. All these are things we can do without really spending any money. It does cost our time.
Let me interrupt 1 sec.
Sure.
In the letter, mention Hatch and Reed have a bipartisan bill that's in Congress right now.
Yeah.
Please vote for it.
Well, I'm going to say something terrible.
Yeah.
I'm not really that crazy about the bill. I think it's written for Lightbridge. But, you know, for what it's worth, you know, so you're getting Kirk Sorensen's personal opinion on that. The third thing is technical. What can we do technically? And I say we, you know, Joe, me, and a couple others, especially at Glenn Research Center, we're trying to get the coolant salts from the MSRE, which were going to be thrown away, transferred up to Glenn Research Center to start working on some of these tests. Oak Ridge stepped in the last minute and said, no, we're keeping it. So where's Jess? I'm going to pick on you for a minute, Jess. All right, you got the salt. All right, we were going to take it. We were going to do some of this. You got it now. You got a loop. Let's go start doing these code qualification tests. I mean, you have a lot of the hardware to get started on this. We can go and trick out that salt and make it think that it's been through a lifter core for the last 20 years. My time is
Google
Jess just pulled the plug on me. There you go. Oh, okay, here we go. Are we back? You guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we could do for not a lot of money. LDRD type funds.
Suggestive.
Some of the salt is actually going to be used. It actually was a part of the Czech Republic. We're actually shipping some over there.
Yeah.
They're going to use that very special salt. You may not want to use that salt in blue because it's got rich lithium.
Yeah, but, well, okay. We may want to take, chemically, you're right. We may want to just, you're right, that should probably go in a reactor. Okay, that's even better, that we can make lithium fluoride, beryllium fluoride salt, and trick it out. And that's a lot cheaper than enriched lithium fluoride salt, which is what just points. This stuff is like 99.99999% lithium 7. That's what makes it special. But that's something that could be done that's a university class experiment. It's not nuclear, there's no neutrons, there's no NRC. I'll bet it could be done for 50 to 100K. So any enterprising professors out there, some of you already have NRC money or DOE money. That's a great experiment that we could go run and get started on. Berkeley could help.
There are some universities that are working on particular University of Wisconsin and might want to.
Okay, so just my suggestion technically, because I agree, it sounds like it's the long pole in the tent. A lot of the other things are linked, but that's one that we need to get started on immediately. So personal, talk to some